All right, so everything should be working now. Sandra, are you there? Okay, let's see if I can find her. Okay, here we go. Sandra, are you there? There we go. Hello, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can. So our camera's not there yet for some reason. There we go. So
Yay!
now we're all going. I don't know why we're having some technical glitches, but on top of I literally have been one of those. I was fighting the traffic and I slid in here to turn my computer on 2 minutes ago. So it is one of those kind of days. And then we just had extra fun. So, welcome to the Fishers History Chat. And I am really excited today about Sandra. By the way, how'd you do on your project?
It ended up being 100 pages. I just turned it in. I haven't gotten my grade yet, but it was a very long project. It was a work of since pretty much last August.
Well, and we get to be the beneficiaries of that tonight. So I don't know if we'll get through 100 pages, but so basically, we are going to be talking about the Kincaid House or the Flanagan Kincaid House, and some people call it the Morris Flanagan Kincaid House. Um, you have done a very, very deep research project on this as your master's project on historical preservation. Is that what it was?
Correct? Yes. Historic
Okay.
preservation at Ball State and their architecture department.
Well, very cool. And we got you got a chance to go through the house, and thankfully, I got to peek along with you. So, Cindy, let me introduce. Once you introduce yourself, who you are, what got you into this mess in the first place, and then we'll start talking about the what you found out.
Well, my name is Sandy McCabe. I serve many hats in the Fishers community. I've lived in Fishers now for 12 years after coming back to Indiana. My previous life is that I'm a urologic surgeon at IU Health and have been interested in historic preservation for really my whole life, but most recently with some just time spent with Indiana landmarks has really become a passion of mine. And so I had realized that there was such a degree as historic preservation and wanted to explore it as a potential career move. And so I looked into doing the master's program of historic preservation at Ball State. And so I'm very excited to hopefully be done with that by next June. Um, but that's really,
And so, did
really,
you just pick the Kincaid House out of for that project, or how did that come about?
well, I wanted the talk called Filling in the Blanks because as I'm sure many people have, is there's so many questions I have about that house. And so really it started out of a curiosity, but more of a concern about that house kind of um, going by demolition, by neglect, by sitting in that location and not really having any attention and concerns for vandalism is really kind of what started it for me.
Okay. Well, so why don't you kind of start us on your project? You have been uncovering, you probably know more about that house now than the people who lived in it.
Uh, yeah, I've spent a lot of time. I actually put together a PowerPoint here, if you don't
Okay.
mind, just
Perfect.
because I have a lot of photos. And so let me get that started here. Can you see that okay?
I can. Thank you. So, okay, let's start with this. Morris Flanagan Kincaid. There seems to be a lot of controversy over that. Some people say the three names, some just say it's Flanagan and Kincaid. So,
Yeah,
what have you learned?
and I'll go into that a little bit, the
Okay, all
history
right.
of
I'm
where the
sorry.
name came from. But so the Morris Flanagan Kincaid House, and so the filling in the blanks, as I talked about, was just having so many questions. And this is the house as it sat before 1999. It's interesting because it looks like it's sitting in the middle of nowhere, but the reality is it's actually sitting in front of Freedom Mortgage building at that time. And this was before the restoration in 1999. But if you just look here at some historical pictures, this was actually part of the Indiana Hamilton County Interim Historic Sites and Structure Survey, which was done in 1992. And this picture was taken as part of that data collection for the county. It was deemed notable as a structure at that time, even though it still was not in great shape. Down here, again, is the picture that we just saw, and that's from an article called The Silent Century to History. And this is where the restoration process is getting started, which was originally done by Don Kincaid back between 1990 and 2000. And again, this is another picture over on the right, where the house is actually in its original position on 106th Street, with the landscape still present around it. Whereas you can see on the pictures on the left that the landscape has been eliminated. And here's two more pictures from the photos that I've gathered, both from the Hamilton County Historic Society, as well as directly from the Kincaid family. And the one up in the top right is the original house with a chimney you can see on the side, which was not present actually in a lot of pictures because it wasn't original. You can also see a porch added to the back, which is, there's an L at the back of the house, but this was an added porch that is no longer present. As well as many of the outbuildings. And the large barn on the left was called Dinner Bell 2, and we'll have some more pictures of that later. And this was used as a dairy barn. They would milk cows in there. I think they said they had 3 rows, and they could milk 30 at a time, I think is what they had told me when I interviewed him. But the things that are really special about this house is what we call the character defining features. And a vernacular Italianate house is really the structure that this is. And vernacular means that it's common use, right? This wasn't designed by an architect. This was probably just put together by Peter Flanagan and his family. Italianate means the type of detail that's in it. And the house is actually a term used for late 19th century homes that were present predominantly in the Midwest. So Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois, I think were the 3 I states. And why it was called the I house is because they were more common in the Midwest. And in terms of the Italianate, you can see the cornice line here is dentate, which means it has the little teeth pattern with these very elaborate scrollwork brackets present, or corbels. The wrought iron work that's on that balcony at the front of the house in the middle of the 3rd bay of windows.
Now, is that original?
You know, I cannot find any pictures that suggest that it's not.
Okay.
So I can't say for sure, but there's no indication that it's not original. The tall elongated windows on the interior, there's these beautiful transoms above the doorway, which, allowed heat exchange between rooms. And then on the L, which is the back end of the house, it has also these kind of fancier cornices here that just give a little bit of detail, but predominantly overall it has some really nice features. So just kind of going through the history, Hamilton County is a relatively new county, and it was settled. Sorry, I'm going to move my pictures here because my photographs are blocking my slides here for me. Sorry about that. So it's actually named after Alexander Hamilton. It was originally settled by the Lenape of the Delaware tribe. William Cowner was the first white settler. He was not the first settler. He was the first white European settler. So that's very important to designate because there were people indigenous to this area. In 1851, the Peru and Indianapolis Railroad laid tracks through Noblesville, and that kind of defined a lot of the county because now the farmers could actually ship their crops and herd to market and made it much more financially feasible for people to farm here. And so by the late 1880s, most of the county was subdivided in either 40 to 80 acre plots, and these were owned mostly by individual farm families. So history of the property starts with Thomas Morris. And Thomas Morris, General Thomas Morris, was a gentleman born in 1811 from Kentucky. He moved to Indianapolis in 1921 with his family when he was only 10 years old. His father was an Indianapolis state auditor. He individually purchased the land in 1835 as part of the Mississippi Railroad Company from a U.S. land grant, and later was subdivided it and was solely owned by him at some point. he was an American Railroad executive after having served in the Civil War and also served as a civil engineer. His early career, he was accepted to the U.S. military after an academy after serving at West Point in 1830. He studied engineering and graduated in 1834. He was part of the Union Brigadier General of the Indiana Militia and led regiments to the Battle of Philippi in 1861. He later helped clear the Confederate Army from West Virginia, and this win bolstered the pro-Union settlement and developed actually the state of West Virginia. His troops served alongside George McClellan, who also was a fellow railroader, and he mustered out of the militia in July of 1861. So reason General Morris is important is, as a civil engineer, he was involved in a large number of infrastructure in the state of Indiana. He helped create made a huge portion of the railroad, including the Crown Hill Railroad, Madison, Indianapolis, Terre Haute to Richmond, Indianapolis and Bellefontaine, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, St. Louis. He also helped in part create the Central Canal and was part of the Crown Hill Cemetery development. He extended the National Road from Richmond to Illinois, and also was in part responsible for the Indiana State House construction. Also, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. He helped establish the Citizens Consumer Gas and also establish the Indianapolis Water Company. So there's a lot that this gentleman did for the state of Indiana.
Wow, I didn't know any of that about him. So
yeah, it's actually a pretty impressive list. And so the reason, where he pulls into this is that he owned the land, which was actually owned by a gentleman by the name of McGuire and Katie. In addition to him, the other two, I don't want to say weren't notable, but they really didn't have the credentials that he ended up having. But they owned that large segment, almost a square mile of land that included where the Fishers Railroad was, as well as east of where we think of 37. And so the original property that this house is on was owned by him. He did not build the house as far as we know, and he did not ever live in the house. So his name, I just put it on there as a history of this property that we're aware of. So really the people who came in is the Flanagan family. So they purchased the land from Katie, who actually had broken it off from Morris at one point in 1853, and he purchased 160 acres of land. His wife's name was Nancy, and they built the house, we think around 1861, knowing very well that it didn't get built in a day, so it probably started in either 59 or 60. It's originally at 106th Street and Kincaid Boulevard, which is where it's located just east of the 106th roundabout, in front of, or just north of the Freedom Mortgage Building. It is made of clay bricks that were produced on site. Peter eventually accumulated upwards of 560 acres of land, but he died unexpectedly in 1866, and Nancy kept the house until 1881. Peter and Nancy had 11 live births. But we think that only 9 children ever lived in the house at one time. So that's a lot of people in a 1,400 square foot house, which is the size of this house. John and Sarah Flanagan ended up inheriting the house, but then John died unexpectedly at age 29. And so Sarah Flanagan moved in there with her children, and eventually Ingram, which is one of Sarah's sons, ended up moving into the house with Cora Flanagan, which was his wife. And so Ingram and Cora Flanagan were the last of the Flanagan family to own the house. And Cora Flanagan and Ingram never had children, so they didn't have anybody to pass it down to. So when Ingram died, then Cora kept the house for a short period of time. In this picture here is Cora sitting in a chair, and I think that this is at her other house. She ended up moving to a house on Lantern Road, kind of around the corner from where this current house was. And then Peter Flanagan's grave is located in the cemetery off Hoosier Road, kind of behind Hamilton proper. So that's where he's currently located. Here's just some pictures I just wanted to show the progression here, but this is where things were starting to get cleared in preparation for, you know, this house kind of literally it languished for a long time. And so until one of the Kincaids came in to redo it, it kind of just sat there, and everything kind of just went, you know, I mean, went down in terms of upkeep and the landscape and the buildings that were on the property with it, which were 4 additional outbuildings at some point, were pretty much almost all gone. Here's another picture again of the back porch coming off the L on the back, one of the old buildings, and then again one of the sheds for equipment that they had. Here are pictures of the barn at the top, and that's the dinner bell too. And you can actually see in this kind of pink colored picture where it says dinner bell. And this was the dinner bell too. And here's a picture of the cows in front of the silo, and the dinner bell too. So in 1921, Loma Kincaid founded the L.E. Kincaid and Sons Meat Market, and this was located on the north side of Indianapolis. They ended up adding a second store in downtown Fishers at 116th Street. But in 1934, after the death of Ingram, Cora Northam, which was her maiden name, sold the house to Loma and Hazel Kincaid. And this is after that time that they purchased it. This was when the outbuildings were created, as far as we know. She ended up dying in 1953. Hazel ended up dying in 1953. And after that, Loma started to sell off pieces of property. And at one point in 1955-56, when I-69 was going to be created, or the expansion of 37 at the time, he sold off, I think it was 20 acres specifically to the Indiana State Highway Department, and that garnered him about $52,000 of land grant from them by eminent domain. And so at some point, somebody stated that the IRS sued the Kincaid family in 1961 for unpaid taxes. And the interesting thing is, I went through the title document of this property, and I never found that that was actually true. There was some of the Flanagans, but not actually of the Kincaid. So sorry, I meant to update that on my slide. And then Loma died in 1965. So really the Kincaid family used this kind of throughout Loma's life, but then he actually had his family members live in it. And actually it was 1937 that Bob and Frances Kincaid moved into the house because Loma moved out after Hazel had died. And they ended up building a house, I think beforehand, it was a Sears house, right? And it was off of, where was that?
It's off Lantern Road.
Lantern Road, right, around the corner. So Hazel
it's
and
like
Loma,
96 and Lantern, I think, or 100.
It's between, you know what, it's between 96th and 106th Street on Lantern Road. Yeah. And so they ended up building that house. So Bob and Frances Kincaid moved into the house, and they lived there for 9 years, where they raised their 2 sons. And that was Bob and Steve. And like down here, sorry. And after they lived there, then the Daubin Specs, which was actually a family member, moved in there. And that was Jim and, sorry, I'm blanking right now. Jim and,
well, it was Bob was
Betty?
the dad. Jim.
Okay.
Lived there.
Jim is the son.
Time. Yeah. And okay. Jim ended up living in the Kincaid house. Yes.
He was, I think perhaps they might have lived there when he was born. I'm not quite sure. But they did live there for a significant amount of time. But here is actually the land grant information where it said that Loma, and actually Alice is who he remarried after Hazel. But interestingly, I cannot find any documentation of a marriage certificate anywhere. So I tried looking up because I was thrown off by the name Alice. But supposedly he remarried, but I could not find that actually anywhere documented. But this is the newspaper article from the Noblesville Ledger that talked about the grant. And then here is talking about Hazel Kincaid before she had passed away, how she was involved in the community at the Star Club. And then here talks about that Bob and Betty Kincaid, that
See, this is fascinating to me because I'm reading this, like this thing with 37. My grandparents literally were across the street of 106th Street, so they had their farm split in half too with that at the exact same time. And then I look over here on the Star Club thing. Dorothy Rollins was my aunt, so it's kind of like it's old home week as we're going through this. It's really fun for me too. So
is your parents' name over here listed?
let's see. It would have been Manny Morgan, Robert Emmanuel Morgan, Francis Morgan. They were the ones who's because they literally were the piece of ground just north of there.
Well, just so you know, this article, there is a whole bunch of names listed, and I
Yeah.
actually cut that off.
Okay.
And then moved up when it was talking about the
Well, that's what
property.
I just was saying. That it would have been right at the same time. So,
Yeah, so they may have been in this, and I actually have the original one, so I can look at it and see if they're
Yeah.
listed in there. And here's their Loma and Hazel's gravesite. So these are some pictures of, these are, if you look here, this is inside the house. At this time, there was carpeting and a oil furnace. Here's an old TV and a piano that were in the house. And again, the old oil furnace. And those were put in by the Dalbin-Specks. That was not there before the Dalbin-Specks owned the home, because the Kincaid family, the early Kincaid family had said that they did not have plumbing in the house, and they didn't have oil heat. So that was not there. And then this is actually Steve Kincaid sitting in the driveway, and this is facing north. So I-69 would be kind of right over to the left in that picture.
That was my grandfather's farm that you're looking at. So
right over here across the fence. And here's some more pictures. And this is Jim Dalbin-Speck, is my understanding, right?
Yes.
Jim, or Jimmy, sorry.
That's what I know.
You know him?
But he knew me as Jimmy too. So things have changed over a couple of years ago. So yeah.
So the kitchen was built in at that back L. And so this is actually, it looks like a linoleum tile. And then back here, there's a refrigerator. The door to exit is off to the left. He's kind of sitting right in front of it. And then here you can see the door in the refrigerator as he's walking out. Can you see my pointer, Jim?
Yeah.
Okay, so here is actually like a pantry that they had. Some people said it was a laundry room, but I don't remember there being plumbing in there when we went through the house. And then here's the door again, going out to the side. And I believe there was a water pump right over here on this side of the building. So, so here are pictures that were taken between 2000 and 2014. So these are before the move. In its original location. And so you can actually see behind the building is peeking. This is the Freedom Mortgage building right back here.
Right.
This is after the renovation had been completed in 2000. So you can see that the white paint had been stripped. The not original chimney here is gone. Interestingly, something that I found out is the windows were changed, and I'll go into that a little bit later. The porch that was added on to the side here is no longer. There was like a little angled porch here that they would step out to. It was just a place to like put their shoes and such. And then again, where there's one outbuilding left over here. I also think it's important to see there's these little windows. These are called rusticated windows. So they're not really true windows, but they make the building look taller. And those would be more like vents that would go into like a crawl space. But you'll see that these are actually gone after the house has been moved. So they're not full length windows. They're just little kind of faux. So this is actually some hardware salvaged by Gail Kincaid and Steve Kincaid, actually from the original property. So I thought those were interesting. And here is some wallpaper that they took pictures of. And upstairs in the master bedroom and the storeroom, and I'll show you a layout of the house, but this was upstairs. This was the wallpaper that they found up on the second floor. It was all very blue. This was said it was, who made it. And then the floors were the hardwood floors on the second floor were actually painted blue. And if you can see that here with some of it missing. And here was a trim piece of wallpaper. But here, and it's a little bit hard to tell because I couldn't really line these pictures up exactly, but the windows have been shortened by at least 1 or 2 brick in terms of length, because what I was told by Gail Kincaid was that these windows were not standard size. And so when the renovation happened, he didn't want to pay for all custom windows. So he shortened the window size to make them standard size. And so here you can see like it's a little bit off. And actually, when you look at the house real closely, you can see 2 layers of brick that look weird under every single window. And that's where it was bricked in. He took brick from the inside and kind of stacked it to the outside to close in that window. So those are all not original. They're just vinyl, literally they're cheap vinyl windows right now. And definitely don't have the same character as these old 4/4 paned glass windows. So here is the 1992 Hamilton County Interim Historic Sites and Structure Survey Inventory. And so you can say that a structure is outstanding, notable, contributing. And so they don't note structures that are not contributing, but notable means that it's of significant importance. And that's what it was determined at in 1992. And this is what the house looked like at the time that was done. So this is the 92 picture. And then when it was on 106th Street, there's something called Section 106 review. And Section 106 is when any federally funded project or federally permitted project is going to undergo, it's going to start the project. Section 106 is where any historic property or cultural resource needs to be determined if it's going to be impacted by that work. And so the work at the 106th roundabout triggered this Section 106 review because the highway department was getting some federal funds for it. And so they determined that at that time that it was a notable structure based on its architecture. Its setting was no longer significant because it's not a working farm. So the setting for a farmhouse is obviously very important. It has to have the feel of a farmhouse, and that had been lost because of the building and the structure and the road getting closer to the house. And so, but they did feel that the house was eligible at that time for the National Register for Historic Places. And so it was deemed important prior to the move. And so this is in 2013. Okay. And they felt that in part it was significant because it was one of the few remaining I-house architecture in Hamilton County, the early examples. And so early on, it became clear that this house was starting to gain momentum as needing to be paid attention to. So this is an article as far back as 1992 saying, hey, extinction possible. You see, this is an article that talked about these houses are endangered. So people already started talking about this house. I mean, we're talking decades ago. Here's another article that talked about the renovation that the house was undergoing. And this was, again, after 1999. It was a $30,000 restoration project. So unfortunately, Dan Kincaid, I believe I believe that the work was finished. Exterior, interior wasn't, and I think it had to do perhaps with his health, from what I remember reading, but I don't want to say that with 100% certainty. So 1 year later, after it was deemed a notable structure, 2014, Thompson Thrift, who is a real estate development firm, said they were going to demolish the house to make way for commercial development. And so what they wanted to do is to take the brick down and repurpose those bricks for a new train station at the Fishers Municipal Complex. And so this raised a lot of concern. So the city of Fishers, the Nickel Plate District, Indiana Landmarks, the Noblesville Preservation Alliance all crowdsourced in order to get funding to save the historic house. It could not be transported across I-69, I guess because of the weight of the structure, although I don't know that that's been documented in the Wolf building or the information that they have on it. But Navient donated the 2-acre plot of land 2,000 feet north of its current location. So the land that was donated was actually still part of the original homestead. And that goes back to Morris owning the land and Flanagan owning the land. Right along I-69 and USA Parkway. So everybody came together, and this was actually one of the logos used as a kind of a promotional tool to try to get people to help fund the project. The house did eventually get moved on October 4th, and I believe that they had less than a month to get this arranged, which is why perhaps its location is a little strange and its placement is a little strange. I don't think that they had a lot of time to really think about it, but it was moved by the Wolf House and Building Movers at a cost of $115,000. They installed 11 steel beams below it. They wrapped chains. You can see inside and out with these protective steel plates here on the corners so that the masonry didn't get damaged. And then they moved it onto a 5-foot deep cinder block slab for the intentional relocation. So here are some pictures of moving day as it was going up up USA Parkway. And then here is a news piece.
It seems like it's been there longer than 2014 to me, but
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, how do I get out of there? Okay, so that's 2014. Here we are 10 years later, and nothing has happened. And I also think that's prudent to point out is that the property where this house was located, there has been nothing developed there. It has not, nothing's been done. So I think the thing that makes me quite angry is what was the urgency to move it and tear it down, right? If there wasn't something imminent, could they not have taken an extra month or two to find a place for this house to go and position it so that it could be usable? Right now, it is not positioned to be usable by anybody. It is literally 70 feet off of the expressway, and it's facing the expressway. So it's not facing the road, which makes it, not particularly favorable for adaptive reuse. And so the windows, and we'll go through that here, but so after it got moved, some people wanted to try to get it on the National Register for Historic Places, but there is this interesting caveat that says that if a house has been moved, it's no longer, it can't be listed on the National Register anymore because you've taken it out of its setting. And so given the significant loss, interior and exterior, and its setting, its association, that it was not going to be eligible, which then takes off the table a lot of grants and funds, because if it's not eligible, then that's problematic. So Commissioners and the Board of Tourism for Hamilton County had decided that they were going to put it inside a roundabout. That was the original plan up until about 2018. Where they were going to make it a kind of a work of art rather than a functional structure. So I do not think they had any intention on restoring the inside. It was really more about restoring the outside and using it as a facade. And that plan ended up getting shut down because they didn't really feel like it was going to provide, I don't think, much benefit. And they were starting, I think, the stadium project somewhere around that time. And I don't think it really fit into what plan they decided that they wanted to do. So it just languishes now in its current location between I-69, off of USA Parkway between 106th and 116th Street. I know most of us have seen this, but the current conditions are pretty poor. So this is the video of the first floor dining room. And you can see the plaster is flaking. There's vents falling out. The plaster is actually fallen off in full thickness. The floors are actually pulling away from the wall. And that's because the joists are actually dropping. That's in the first floor dining room. And that's, if you're facing the house, that's the room on the right. First floor living room is probably the worst because of water damage that's coming through this chimney pipe, it looks like. But the windows are busted out. Some of the doors are missing. There's a lot of holes in the hardwood floors, and you can see over to the left. I'm actually going to pause this because I really didn't pay attention to this, Jim, when we walked around. But if you can look at the distance from the floorboard to the
How far it's
joist,
fallen?
that's fallen at least a foot.
Yes,
and we were walking on this.
I was very, very concerned walking on it. I will tell you that, because I was in the building business, and I'm going, there's nothing really holding this up other than imagination and some plywood.
Yes, I think that it is sort of supported on the inside of the house, but the outside it's free floating. I mean, there is nothing supporting that joist at all. So yeah, so structurally very concerning. And then this is the bathroom that they had added on in the back of the L. And the Dalbin specs had added this after the Kincaid family had moved out. This board looks like there's termite damage. So I think that could play a role in what's going on with the joists not being structurally stable, although this has not been proven by a termite inspector.
No.
The windows are broken out. There's the electric board that was added again later. I'm sorry. Here is the Dalbin specs had actually dug out a basement, which had not been there. And then they added this doorway. And so this is the doorway that leads down to where the basement would be. And when we inspected this, Jim, do you remember it just went to nowhere? There was a window, but it was actually filled with water, and it's built in under the original stairway. But that's the water down there was,
there's several feet of water in there. So
yeah, that's about 5 feet deep. So I'm guessing that water is at least 4 feet deep.
Yeah.
I inspected this property previously. This was right after we had all those massive rains. So very recently in April, but I had inspected this before that, and that basement was completely dry. So that was actually new. And then here is, we go upstairs. This is the master bedroom. This is an added closet. This is not original, and you can tell because there's drywall. All the original walls are plaster. And
the upstairs was surprisingly in good shape.
Yes.
Comparatively, well, the other one is totally imaginary, and then this upstairs, actually, I was real concerned about walking up there. If it was like downstairs, I wasn't going to be there. So, you know.
So there's damage and a lot of vandalism in there. This is inside where the kitchen used to be, but there's nothing left, right? There is no sink, there's no plumbing, there's nothing to indicate that this was ever a kitchen. Everything's been torn out. And then here are the entryway. So this is the front door that's been, glass has been knocked out, and there's holes in the floor right when you come in. And this is the stairway, which had a lot of animal and perhaps even human feces throughout the stairway and up into the second floor. And actually, I think there was a goose egg in one corner of a room because it was way too big to be a normal bird egg. So really, when I took over this project, there had to be some goals for restoration and rehabilitation. Is what can we do with this house, right? Is it even possible? And so the things that I think are going to be really important in any plan of this house is really to maintain the iHouse floor plan. I wouldn't want somebody coming here knocking down walls and making it an open space. It really needs to kind of keep to that classic iHouse architecture, which is why it's architecturally significant. Whoever if anybody were to ever take it over, I would highly encourage putting back in the tall windows to get that back to the original sizes. Absolutely keeping that dentate cornice, scrollwork corbels, and the transoms would be very important. And to salvage as much of the original hardwoods as possible. That whether that can happen on the first floor or not is, yet to be seen. The whole exterior needs to be repointed, and so there's some masonry that needs to be repaired. You'd have to maintain the added bathroom and the laundry and or pantry and upstairs bedroom closet, only because those make it functional. And without having those, we wouldn't want to necessarily go back to the original based on that. And there was a door added between the dining room and the kitchen, and I would close that back over and get rid of that access to the basement, especially if there's no basement present. So where do adaptive reuse projects, what have we done in Fishers, really? So the Eller House, has been used corporate as well as a Starbucks, with the addition of a building at the back. And this is off of, is it 96? It's 96, right, Jim?
That's 116th.
Oh, okay, 116th. Yeah, sorry about that. So then here is the Ambassador House, and this actually was moved. And that is at the
it's like 106th and Eller back in there somewhere.
Yes. And the Heritage Gardens is where it's located, and it's used as a wedding venue now. And then the William Connor House is obviously being used is restored as a house museum. But these are some structures that are kind of around the same age and how they've been repurposed. And then smaller structures, the Schoolhouse 7 Cafe is just over on Southeastern by Cynthan Park. And then the Fowl Creek Township building, which is at 116th and Brook School. This was actually Schoolhouse #1 originally. So people have reused these structures in Fishers. You don't really pay attention to that fact that those are, historic structures, but they are. These are some 3D renderings that were done by my son, which is pretty amazing that he could do these 3D renderings on the computer. But those are some pictures. And this is what the floor plan would look like if it was restored, where the windows would, go down closer to the floor. They have this nice trim work. This is where the thimble for the vent used to be for the chimney, the door that we talked about. So this would be the dining room. This is the parlor, the stairway where we came in. This is the kitchen, and then the pantry and the bathroom. So this is what the floor plan could look like. And then here's the second floor. When you come up the stairs, you turn, and there's this big landing, which is where Bob said he used to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he used to sleep here, and it was very cold. He remembers that. He said it was not in the master bedroom, which was over here. And then here's that smaller room off to the side, and that was really just a storage room. But again, these are kind of pictures of what it could look like. And this is kind of a walkthrough of the exterior, the 3D renderings. My son actually made this on Roblox.
That's cool.
Yeah. He had to create the corbels and out of certain shapes, all on his own. And then here is what the house interior would look like on the inside. Oops, sorry about that. Oh, why is it not playing? Here we go. Let's do that again. So when you walk in the front door, again, there's the stairway, the door with the transom going into that dining room area with the door at the back of the room closed off. And then this would be the front room. That's the parlor, and you walk directly to the kitchen, which is off to the back, and that's where those two side rooms are. And then if we go, oh, sorry. Okay, so one of the parts of my project was to do a pro forma on restoration, which is just kind of an estimate of, okay, well, how could we make this work? So just fixing the house, not moving it, not doing any of that, it would be about $372,000. And that's pretty pricey for a house that's only 1,400 square feet. But the problem is it gets more complicated than that. Is the property that it's on is not part of the house. Fishers owns the house. Fishers doesn't want the house. Fishers willing to give away the house, even with the $50,000 allocation to anybody who'd like to move it, because I don't think they want the liability of the house. And since they don't have a use for it, I think they want to see it used. It's just getting somebody to want to use it is really the important thing. But it's going to have to be relocated, even if it stays on that land, which I do not think is even possible. But if it were to stay on that land, it has to be turned in order for it to be useful. And so to buy an acre lot in that corridor is about $350,000. That's about what it's running. It goes up to as high as $1 million an acre, I think, is what when I looked at the real estate. To move it would be about 105,000, and that's based on a more recent quote from Wolf Building Movers. They had quoted in 2018 to move it a half mile to the roundabout was going to be $86,000, and so he said the updated price would probably be about 105 now. You'd have to redo landscaping, you have to redo hardscaping, right? Driveways and sidewalks and stairs into the house. And so now that alone is 466,000. So if you, and then you look at soft costs, legal fees, structural engineers, all these things that need to happen, it's about 151,000. So when you add that all together, we're looking at just shy of $1 million for 1,400 square feet. And that's going to end up being about $700 a square foot.
Pricey.
Yes, it's very pricey. But that would be the cost with relocating with property. Ideally, finding somebody who already has property.
If when they originally donated that land, that 2 acres for it, was it a donation or was it just a loan? And could they take it back over towards the roundabout and have a little spur come off to a parking lot if they spun it around?
Yeah, so it's still listed to the people who own the Navient building.
Okay.
So, one article I read said that they would grant the deed to whoever became the steward of the house. But Fishers owns the house, but Fishers doesn't own the property. So that never happened. So that's a good question. And that's one thing I do need to figure out with.
Because I'm just thinking if you could spin it around, put a parking lot in front of it and have it come off that roundabout, it's not ideal for residential or for retail because of you've got business traffic, but not a lot of commercial traffic.
But there will be, with that new stadium going in, there's going to be a lot more traffic over in that area. So that is something that somebody could maybe, keep in mind. Here's some possible credits. It might be eligible up to $157,000 in credits. And so when you take that off and it ends up coming, if you can get commercial rent from it, pay the mortgage, the insurance, the cost per month would be about $5,800 if it was mortgaged at 75%. And then the commercial rent. I mean, getting a loan for this structure I think would be very difficult. It'd really have to be almost somebody who has cash in hand. So what can you use it for? So vacation rental, an Airbnb, a VRBO, a small retail space such as a jewelry store. I would think something more fine, like wine or cheese shop. I think it would be a great idea. An art gallery, although Fisher's new building that the city hall is going to have an art gallery space. So that is not necessarily, I think, a great idea unless it's a private art gallery. Private office space for somebody like a law firm. I think it could be a hair salon or a barber shop, although it doesn't have a lot. It could get in about 8 chairs, I think, and have an office upstairs. I think it'd be great for a Fishers Historical Society or a City of Fishers museum. But we need to gain $1 million of the money to make that happen.
We're a little short right now, but
yeah, we're a little short. Photography studio, and then even a Hamilton County Visitor Center. If there's going to be a lot of traffic coming in to people in that area, that is something that could be possible. Although they looked at it as their headquarters, but not necessarily as a visitor center, and the photography studio. So here's kind of what office space would look like built in. Here's the rendering of what a beauty salon could look like. And like I said, you could fit 3 chairs in each room and perhaps 2 more off to the back. Here's what a retail space like a jewelry store could look like. And here's the little art gallery renderings that my son did in Roblox. But here's a retail rendering. So when you come in, you have these beautiful chandeliers and have space for displays, and you could put storage on the walls and even go into the back. I was to keep it useful, I was going to recommend a little kitchenette. I don't think it necessarily needs a full kitchen and a full bath if it's going to be used for something retail. But that could be a storage room. And then, is this the same one replaying? Oh yeah, sorry. And here's an upstairs. This is the, like a little office space. You could technically get 4 offices, 4 private offices in there, if you kept the structure of the iHouse. And then here's what kind of a beauty salon area could look like. Okay, so the house has a rich history embedded in Fishers and Hamilton County. I firmly believe it's worth saving. It is one of the few Italianate iHouse examples left in Hamilton County. And if a rehabilitation is contemplated, I would recommend maintaining the iHouse as an Italianate house, features and the floor plan, which give it its architectural character. Given the significant cost burden of relocation and restoration, the pro forma suggested it's going to be very difficult to make it financially lucrative to restore the project. So I think that it's going to have to be somebody who would be a passion project. Moving it to a residential property could be of significant challenge because it's really landlocked by that commercial district. And to move it becomes extraordinarily expensive when you start talking about several miles. And since it can't cross the expressway, it can't, move to the Heritage Park. It can't move over to Conner Prairie, although Conner Prairie has no interest in it. I actually talked to the collections manager there. So really, you have to really look for maybe a nonprofit use. But again, you have to fundraise money for restoration, but also to save and run it. So there has to be like an endowment if something like that is going to happen. I do think the Fishers community could come together and get together funds to do something with the house. I just don't know if it's going to be enough.
Carmel's the Carmel's Historical Society has multiple millions of dollars of thing. Fishers does not have
the endowment.
Yeah.
And you're not supported by the city of Fishers at all, correct?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. It would be nice if there was some commitment to Fishers history. This is an area that has grown so fast, so quickly. I think that it's easy to forget the heritage.
Well, yeah, we did the very first one of these Fishers history chats. I had Phil Cowie, who was the first full-time professional firefighter in Fishers, and he's the one that took them from volunteers to that. When he moved to Fishers in the late 70s, there were 1,300 people, and when he left, there were 13,000 in the late 80s. Of course, today's 130. So 130,000. So people have no idea about Fishers history. Most people, have come here in the last, 20 to 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the nickel plate building that was a loss for Fishers. So
there's a few of us old timers out there, but yes, there's not many. So. Well, I think this is phenomenal. It's fascinating. I don't know if we have anybody that's got any questions. I'm not seeing any questions pop up in the moment, but but that's awesome to see what's going on here. So those are some different things. Are you looking at trying to run this past anyone, or to try to ignite a fire? You've got the kindling all put to place here, so
yeah. I've spoken to a couple people with city planning and with the deputy mayor, and the general thought is they don't really have a plan for it, and that they would be more than willing to get rid of it. And so, but that's about what their whole plan with it is. I think honestly, that they would love for it to just fall down, and then they don't have to be, touted as tearing it down. But if you don't do anything, it's gonna demolish itself without a doubt, with the water encroachment and the vandalism. And you can see, like I said, that floor's collapsing already.
Well, when the floor collapses, what's holding it all together? It could all start coming down.
Yeah. I would love to move it. We talked about, I have that 18-acre property that's up north, but it cannot survive that far of a
Yeah.
travel, and it can't go across 69.
Yeah, it needs to go somewhere pretty close by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it would really have to be somewhere in like the 106, maybe just south of 106, like the Lantern Road area. The churches I know have some property near there. Um, it would really have to be like literally stopping and knocking on the door of everybody in that vicinity to see if anybody would be interested.
I just saw that we have someone here that Joe Ottinger is watching us. He was part of that whole community there as well. So, well, very cool. So, well, I like I said, I'm very excited. Thank you so much for all this. Thank you for getting me in there. That was scary and exciting at the same time. So, and our Fishers representative had a blast because he was getting a chance to poke around in there as well.
Do
And
you remember what his name was?
I don't. Do you?
Was it Jacob?
Yes, yes, it was.
Okay.
In
Yeah,
fact,
he was.
he gave me the confidence. He went storming upstairs to look around, and he was bigger guy than me. So I figured if he stayed and didn't fall through, then I was safe to go up there. But it was much safer upstairs than it was downstairs.
Yeah, I think that there's the thought of multiple of us standing on that floor at the same time is probably
Yeah.
more scary than one of us individually.
Well, we were trying to kind of maneuver around so we weren't like too close together to push that whole beam in. So that wood floor was totally imaginary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't think it has much longer. But I do, when I inspected the crawl space when it was dry, it did look like there may have been some termite damage on some of the joists underneath there. And like I said, I wonder if that's what's going on in combination with the water.
now
And why
that,
that
and then of
side
course
failed.
the water is going to create mold, and so it's just an ongoing process. But
Yeah.
it does look like it's salvageable, but it's going to have to be done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if anybody, I mean, people have asked about a GoFundMe. I mean, honestly, I think if people really want to donate, they really need to donate to a not-for-profit, right?
Yeah.
So that it's, so at least they can take a tax credit for it. So, I mean, if money wants to be funneled through you at the Fishers Historic Society, maybe we can figure out something to do with it.
Well, anybody that's watching this or watches it down the road, because the last one we did with Bob Kincaid has had over 1,000 views now. So hope this one will get a lot of views. And if anybody out there hears something and goes, "Hey, I got a solution," we're all ears.
We are all ears.
Yeah, yeah. So we are committed to trying to do something if we can figure it out, and we're looking for as many brains as possible to come up with those solutions.
Yeah, and I think also too, if anybody, like I said, owns property in that, within a mile radius that's not across I-69, so it has to be east of I-69. Even if it's a half-acre lot, right? I don't think you can go much smaller than that if you're going to turn it commercial. But if somebody has any property in the area that they're willing to, to sell at a reasonable price in order to move it, I mean, my husband and I would probably even take the financial reins to do that. But as it stands now, it's just not, it's not going to be lucrative, in the short term for sure. Because it's
Maybe
going to take a lot of upfront.
One of those churches that has a lot of land or something, maybe they could put it on a corner to, create some kind of thing. Who knows? So make it, but well, I am excited about it. I'm thrilled to get your information on this. This was phenomenal. If people have questions, is there, would you mind if people try to find you or?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, but also probably the best email would be URODOCSAM, so eurodocsam@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll put that on the video when I put it on the YouTube if you like, so people can find you if that's okay with you. So
Yep.
All right. Well, this will be on our Fishers Historical Society Facebook page, and we're creating a YouTube page for these to go on to as well. I think we have one. It's just that I haven't been able to find it yet, so I got to talk at our next meeting where it is. So anyway, thank you so much for coming and all the great, and hopefully you get a rock star A++ on your thesis here. So.
Yes, and I'll get a copy of the final project to you and to the Kincaids as well. And I'll actually put one in the file folder at the Hamilton County Historic Society.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.